Hello again, everyone. This is Smiles, and I'll be reading the next chapter for Midnight for Charlie Bone by Jenny Nimmo. I hope you guys enjoy. The Flame Cats. Charlie froze. He couldn't believe his uncle had seen him. But then the question came again. Charlie, why are you following me? Charlie walked out from behind a tree. How did you know? He asked in a whisper. Peyton turned to look at him. I haven't got eyes in the back of my head, if that's what you're thinking. No, I didn't think that, said Charlie. But how? I saw you, dear boy, as I turned the corner. To tell the truth, I was half expecting it. I don't suppose you could sleep after that dreadful evening. Peyton gave a grim smile. Is that your talent, Uncle Peyton? Charlie asked. Brightening the lights? Pathetic, isn't it? I ask you, what use is it? I wish you hadn't seen. Peyton regarded his lean fingers. Come on, let's get you home. I've done enough for tonight. He tucked Charlie's hand through his arm, and they began to walk home again. Charlie saw a new side to his uncle. Not many people could boost a light just by being there. In fact, as far as he knew, no one had ever done such a thing before. Lights played a big part in the nightlife of a city. Uncle Peyton could have a wild time down in the center, where lights winked and glittered on every surface. Have you ever, done what you just did to lots of lights? Asked Charlie. Like in a place where all the theaters and cinemas and discos are? For a moment, Charlie thought that Peyton wasn't going to reply. Perhaps he shouldn't have asked. And then his uncle murmured. Once. Long ago. I did it for a girl I knew. Wow. Was she impressed? She ran away, said Peyton sadly, and never spoke to me again. I see. Wouldn't it be safer if you went out in the daytime, Uncle Peyton? I mean, there aren't so many lights on. Huh? You must be joking, said his uncle. Every shop window has a light in it. There are lights everywhere, and people can see me in the daylight. Besides, it's become a habit. I just don't like daylight, and won't be caught in it. They had reached number 9, and Charlie hurried back to the bed before anyone else in the house woke up. He fell asleep almost at once and dreamed that Uncle Peyton had turned up the light in every star until they all exploded like fireworks. In the morning, Charlie woke up with a nasty sinking feeling. Whether he liked it or not, he would soon be going to Bloor's Academy. Just thinking about it made him feel ill. He could only manage one slice of toast for breakfast. The egg and bacon Macy put in front of him were left untouched. He's worried. Aren't you, love? Clucked Macy. Those miserable U-beams. Why should you go to that nasty big school? We'll get you some chocolate at the shops. That'll cheer you up. Grandma Bone was not present. She always had breakfast in her room, and Peyton only ate at night as far as Charlie knew. He glanced at his mother, who was miles away in some kind of reverie. Will I have to wear a special uniform? He asked. His mother looked up with a start. A blue cape, she said. The musicians wear blue. Sapphire. A lovely color. But I'm not a musician, said Charlie. Not strictly speaking, his mother agreed. But they won't have a department for your talent, Charlie. You'll be put into music like your father. Take your school recorder. I'm sure that will do. Will it? Charlie said doubtfully. He'd never been good at music and only played his recorder when he was forced to. When will I have to start? After half-term, his mother told him. So soon? Charlie was horrified. In the middle of a term? Before Christmas? I'm sorry, Charlie, his mother said regretfully. The U-beams think it would be best. They say there's not a moment to be lost now that they are certain. Poor mite, Macy muttered. It had begun to rain again, and Macy pulled on a bright pink mac. Charlie's mother took an umbrella from the hall stand. She didn't like wearing a mackintosh. We won't be long at the shop, she told Charlie. Do you want to take the photograph back? Charlie had almost forgotten Benjamin's birthday card. For some reason, he was reluctant to lose the photo just yet. No, he said. But could you buy a birthday card for Benjamin? I don't think I'll be using Runner Bean after all. When Macy and his mother had gone, Charlie ran upstairs to fetch the orange envelope. He had just opened it and pulled out the photo when the doorbell rang. No one answered it. Grandma Bone was out, apparently, and Uncle Peyton wouldn't even answer the telephone during the day. Still holding the photograph, Charlie went down to open the door. A very strange man stood on the step. Stranger still were the cats winding themselves round his legs. Onimus and Flames, said the man. Pest control. He produced a card from the inside pocket of a furry-looking coat. Ominous? Charlie said. Not at all, said the man. Onimus. Quite different. Orville Onimus. He gave Charlie a big smile, revealing sharp, bright teeth. I believe you have a problem here. Mice. He gave a funny sort of leap and landed beside Charlie. I don't know, said Charlie. He'd been told never to let a stranger into the house, but this one was already in. Did someone send for you? Something did. I can't tell you what it was just yet. You might not believe me. Really? Charlie was intrigued. The cats had followed Mr. Onimus and were now prowling round the hall. They were most unusual-looking cats. The first, a deep copper color. The second, a bright orange. And the third, a fierce yellow. The copper cat seemed to know Charlie. It stood on its hind legs and rattled the kitchen doorknob. Have patience, Aries, said Mr. Onimus. Will you never learn? Aries had managed to turn the knob. The kitchen door swung open, and he ran inside, followed by the other two cats. Sorry about this, said Mr. Onimus. He's an impetuous fellow, is Aries. Leo's a bit pushy too, but Sagittarius has lovely manners. Excuse me, I'd better keep an eye on them. Before Charlie had time to turn around, Mr. Onimus had slipped past him and hopped into the kitchen, calling, Flames, don't let me down. Do it nicely. All three cats were now pacing before the larder. Charlie remembered the rotting fruit, and before the cats could break through another door, he opened it and let them in. A fierce pouncing, leaping, and screaming began. The larder was apparently full of mice. Not for long. The cats dispatched one mouse after another, depositing their bodies in a neat line across the wall. Charlie backed away. He hadn't known there were any mice at all in the larder. Why hadn't Macy or his mother noticed? Perhaps they all had arrived this morning, drawn by the smell of old fruit. Charlie was rather fond of mice and wished he didn't have to watch a row of little gray bodies grow longer and longer. When the line was 15 mice long, the cats appeared to have finished the job. They sat down and vigorously washed their immaculate fur. "How about a cup of coffee?" said Mr. Onimus. "I feel quite exhausted." As far as Charlie could tell, Mr. Onimus had hardly lifted a finger, let alone done anything exhausting. The cats had done all the work. But Mr. Onimus was now sitting at the kitchen table, looking eagerly at the coffee tin, and Charlie didn't have the heart to disappoint him. He was still holding the photograph, so he put it down and went to fill the kettle. "Ah," said Mr. Onimus. "Here we have it. This explains everything." "What does?" Charlie looked at the photograph, which Mr. Onimus was now holding up to the light. Mr. Onimus pointed to the cat at the bottom of the photograph. "That's Aries," he said. "It was quite a few years ago, but he doesn't forget. He knew you'd spotted him. That's why he led me here." "Pardon?" Charlie felt weak. He sat down. "Are you saying that Aries," he pointed to the copper-colored cat, "Aries knew I'd seen his photo?" "It wasn't quite like that." Mr. Onimus scratched his furry-looking head. His pointed nails were in need of a good cut, Charlie noticed. Macy would have never let anyone get away with nails as long as that. The kettle boiled, and Charlie made Mr. Onimus his coffee. "What was it like, then?" he asked, putting the cup before his visitor. "3 sugars, please," said Mr. Onimus. Charlie impatiently tossed 3 spoonfuls of sugar into the coffee. Mr. Onimus beamed. He took a sip, beamed again, and then, leaning close to Charlie, he said, "He knew you were connected, Aries did. And so you are. You have the photograph. These cats aren't ordinary. They know things. They chose me because I've got a special way with animals. They led me here and there, trying to undo mischief, and I just follow, helping where I can. The case." His finger came down on the man holding the baby. "This is one of the worst. Aries has always been very angry about it. Time and again he's tried to put it right. But we needed you, Charlie." "Me?" said Charlie. "You're one of the endowed, aren't you?" Mr. Onimus spoke softly, as if it were a secret not to be spoken out loud. "They say so," said Charlie. He couldn't help but look at the photograph, with Mr. Onimus's fingers stuck so accusingly on the man's face. And as soon as he looked, he began to hear the baby crying. Aries ran over to him and, placing his paws on Charlie's knees, let forth an ear-splitting yowl. His cry was immediately taken up by Orange Leo and Yellow Sagittarius. The noise was so painful, Charlie had to press his hands over his ears. "Hush!" commanded Mr. Onimus. "The boy's thinking." When the yells had died down, Mr. Onimus said, "You see, you are connected, Charlie. Now tell me all about it." Although decidedly odd, Mr. Onimus looked kind and trustworthy, and Charlie was badly in need of help. He told Mr. Onimus about the mix-up with the photographs, the voices, the horrible U-beam aunts, and their assessment, and their decision to send him to Bloor's Academy. "And I really don't want to go there," finished Charlie. "I think I'd almost rather die." "But Charlie boy, that's where she is," said Mr. Onimus. "The lost baby. At least that's what the cats seem to think, and they're never wrong." He stood up. "Come on, cats, we've got to go." "You mean the baby in the photograph was lost?" said Charlie. "How can you lose a baby?" "It's not for me to say," said Mr. Onimus. You take that photo where it belongs, and perhaps they'll tell you." "But I don't know where it belongs," said Charlie, beginning to panic. Mr. Onimus was slipping away without helping at all. "Use your loaf, Charlie. That's an enlargement, isn't it? Find the original and you'll find a name and address." "Will I?" "Without a doubt." Mr. Onimus smoothed the pile on his coat, turned up his collar, and made for the front door. Charlie stood uncertainly, questions bubbling in his head. By the time he reached the open door, all that could be seen of his visitor was a small, disappearing figure, followed by a flash of hot colors like the bright tail of a comet. Charlie closed the door and ran upstairs. Seizing the orange envelope, he shook it fiercely, and out fell a small photograph. The original of the enlargement downstairs. He turned it over, and there, sure enough, was a name and an address written in bold, flowing letters. Miss Julia Ingledew, 3 Cathedral Close. Where Cathedral Close? And how was he? Where was Cathedral Close, and how was he to get there? He would have to leave the house before Macy and his mother got home. They would never agree to his roaming off on his own to a place he didn't know, and if he didn't act now, he might not get back in time for Benjamin's party. But he'd have to leave a message, or his mother would worry. As far as he could remember, Charlie had never been inside his uncle's room before. A "Do Not Disturb" sign hung permanently on the door. Recently, Charlie had begun to wonder what Peyton did inside all day. Sometimes a soft tapping could be heard. Usually, there was silence. Today, Charlie would have to ignore the notice. He knocked on the door hesitantly at first, and then more vigorously. "What?" said a cross voice. "Uncle Peyton, can I come in?" asked Charlie. "Why?" queried Peyton. "Because I have to find somewhere, and I want you to explain to Mom." There was a deep sigh. Charlie didn't dare open the door until his uncle said coldly, "Come in then, if you must." Charlie turned the doorknob and peered inside. He was surprised by what he saw. His uncle's room was overflowing with paper. It hung from shelves, dripped from piles on the windowsill, covered Peyton's desk, and lapped like a tide around his ankles. Where was the bed? Under a blanket of books, Charlie guessed. Books lined the walls from floor to ceiling. They even climbed around the desk in tottering towers. "Well," said Peyton, glancing up from a mound of paper. "Please, can you tell me where Cathedral Close is?" Charlie asked nervously. "Where do you think?" "Beside the cathedral, of course." Peyton was a different person in daylight, chilly and forbidding. "Oh," said Charlie, feeling foolish. "Well, I'm going there now, but could you tell Mom? She'll want to know, and—" "Yes, yes," murmured Peyton. With a vague wave, he motioned Charlie away. "Thanks," said Charlie, closing the door as quietly as he could. He went to his room, hurriedly put on an anorak, and tucked the photo in his orange envelope into his pocket. Then he left the house. From his bedroom window, Benjamin saw Charlie walking past with a determined expression. Benjamin opened his window and called, "Where are you going?" Charlie looked up. "To the cathedral," he said. "Can me and Runner Bean come?" asked Benjamin. "No, I'm going to get your present. It's going to be a surprise." Benjamin closed the window. He wondered what sort of present Charlie could buy in a cathedral. A pen with the cathedral's name on it? Benjamin had plenty of pens. Still, I don't really mind, he told Runner Bean, as long as he comes to my party. Runner Bean thumped his tail on Benjamin's pillow. He was lying where he wasn't supposed to on Benjamin's bed. Luckily, no one but Benjamin knew about it. The cathedral in the old part of the city. Here, the streets were cobbled and narrow. The shops were smaller, and in their softly lit windows, expensive clothes and jewelry lay on folds of silk and velvet. It seemed a very private place, and Charlie felt almost as though he were trespassing. As the ancient cathedral began to loom above him, the shops gave way to a row of old half-timbered houses. Number 3 Cathedral Close, however, was a bookshop. Above the door, a sign in old-world script read Ingledew's. The books displayed in the window were aged and dusty-looking. Some were bound in leather, their leaves edged in gold. Charlie took a deep breath and went in. A bell tinkled as he stepped down into the shop, and a woman appeared through a curtained gap behind the counter. She wasn't as old as Charlie expected, but about the same age as his mother. She had thick chestnut hair piled up on her head and kind brown eyes. "Yes," said the woman. "Can I help you?" "I think so," said Charlie. "Are you Julia Ingledew?" "Yes," she nodded. "I've come about your photograph," said Charlie. The woman's hand flew to her mouth. "Goodness," she said. "Have you found it?" "I think so," said Charlie, handing over the orange envelope. The woman opened the envelope, and the 2 photos fell onto her desk. "Oh, thank you," she said. "I can't tell you how glad I am to have these." "Have you got mine?" asked Charlie. "My name's Charlie Bone." "Come through," said Miss Ingledew, motioning Charlie to follow her through the curtain. Charlie walked cautiously around the counter and through the curtain in the wall of books. He found himself in a room not unlike the shop, all books again, packed tight on shelves or lying in piles on every surface. It was a cozy room for all that. It smelled of warm, rich words and very deep thoughts. A fire burned in a small iron grate, and table lamps glowed through the parchment-colored shades. "Here we are," said Julia Ingledew. From a drawer she produced an orange envelope. Charlie took the envelope and opened it quickly. "Yes, it's Runner Bean," he said, "my friend's dog. I'm going to make a birthday card with it." "A lovely idea," said Miss Ingledew. "More personal. I always like personal. It shows one cares, doesn't it?" "Yes," said Charlie uncertainly. "Well, I'm very grateful to you, Charlie Bone," she said. "I feel you should have a reward of some sort. I haven't got much cash about, but I wonder." "It doesn't matter," said Charlie, a little embarrassed, though he could have done with some money to buy Benjamin's present. No, really. I think you're just the person, in fact. I feel that these have been waiting just for you." She pointed to a corner, and Charlie saw that his first impression of the room had been mistaken. It was not filled entirely with books. A table in one corner was piled high with boxes, wooden boxes, metal boxes, and big cardboard cartons. "What's in those?" asked Charlie. "My brother-in-law's effects," she said. "All that is left of him. He died last week." "Oh, dear." "No, not his ashes, Charlie," said Miss Ingledew. "They're his, what shall I call them, inventions? They arrived yesterday. He sent them by courier the day before he died. Goodness knows why he left them to me." She fetched one of the boxes, removed the lid, and took out a metal robotic-looking dog. "It's no good to me," she said. "Do you want it?" Charlie thought of Runner Bean and then of Benjamin. "Does it do anything?" he asked, because inventions usually did something. "Of course. Let me see." She pulled down the dog's tail. It barked twice, and a sound voice came. "I am number 2. You have already pulled my tail, so you know how to make me play. To fast forward, press my left ear. To rewind, press my right ear. To record, press my nose. To stop, pull my right foot up. To replace tapes, open my stomach." The voice that gave the instructions was familiar to Charlie. "Any use to you?" asked Miss Ingledew. "Or would you like to see the others?" "It's perfect," said Charlie. "Brilliant! But the voice, is it your—" "Yes, my brother-in-law, Dr. Tully. It was one of his earliest, but he never bothered to sell it. Once a thing was made, that was it. He was a lazy man, Charlie. Clever, but lazy." "It's him in the photo, isn't it?" Charlie didn't mention that he'd recognized the voice. How could he? "Yes, that's Dr. Tully. He did something terrible once." Miss Ingledew's mouth closed in a grim line. "Why did you want his photo, then?" asked Charlie. The bookseller darted a quick look as if she were sizing him up. "It's the baby I want," she said at last. "It's all I have to remember her by." And suddenly Miss Ingledew was telling Charlie about the dreadful day when her sister Nancy died, just before her daughter's 2nd birthday, and how a few days later Nancy's husband, Dr. Tully, had given his daughter away. "I didn't think you could give children away," Charlie said, horrified. "You can't, Miss Ingledew. I was sworn to secrecy. I should have taken her, you see, but I was selfish and irresponsible. I didn't think I could cope. Not one day has passed since then when I haven't regretted my decision. I tried to find out who she'd been given to, where she had gone, but Dr. Tully would never tell me. She was lost in a system of lies and tricks and forgery. She'd be 10 years old now, and I'd give anything to get her back." Charlie felt very uncomfortable. He was being drawn into a situation he didn't much like. If only he hadn't heard the voices in the photograph. How could he possibly tell Miss Ingledew that the 3 cats thought the lost baby was in Bloor's Academy? She would never believe him. In a shadowy corner, a grandfather clock struck 12, and Charlie said, "I think I'd better go home now. Mom will be worried." "Of course. But take the dog, Charlie. And—" She suddenly darted to the table and withdrew a long silver case from the bottom of a pile. "Will you take this one as well?" She didn't wait for an answer, but plunged it into a bag marked Ingledew's Books. Handed the bag to Charlie. She said, "You can pop the dog in as well. There's just enough room." The bag was unbelievably heavy. Charlie carefully placed the dog in its box on top of the metal case. Then he trundled to the door, wondered how on earth he would manage to heave the bag all the way home. Julia Ingledew helped him up the step and opened the shop door, which gave another melodious ring. "I hope you don't mind my asking," said Charlie, "but what's in the case?" The answer was rather surprising. "I don't know," said Miss Ingledew, "and I'm not sure I want to. Dr. Tully exchanged it for his baby. Whatever it is, it can't be worth as much as a baby, can it?" No," said Charlie. He put the bag on the ground. "Please take it, Charlie. You look just like the right person." "I've got to get it out of my house, you see." She lowered her voice and darted a quick look down the street. "And can I ask you to keep it a secret for now?" "That's a bit difficult," said Charlie, even more reluctant to take the strange case. "Can't I even tell my best friend?" "Tell no one who you wouldn't trust with your life," said Miss Ingledew. And that is the end of this chapter. So I find this a little funny, and I'll just mention this real quick before I say goodbye. Both Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter and Charlie Bone both have a character similar, different names of course, but the first names are very similar. Both are named Nancy, and surprisingly, they both have died. I mean, I know one is partial actual history and the other one's, just a story, but still, I find it a little interesting. I never realized that before. Anyway, as always, thank you for listening, and until next time, like and subscribe if you want to hear more, and leave any feedback in the comments. Description to follow for more information on my Twitter will be, down below under the video. Thank you again for listening. Bye.